So we definitely had some interesting things happen at the last Planning Commission meeting.
We certainly did. So I guess the first thing that happened was there was no agenda posted on their official website page.
So nothing happened.
No. And when I brought it up, and Roxy Sobel said that she's putting that in the minutes because you have to have it, the assertion, in the official record. Vice Chairman Tom Strife had asked Gus, well, what happened, Gus? And he claims he had sent the correct agenda out, but on both websites, the official township and the one that's maintained by the county, they did not have the agenda for the Planning Commission meeting for some unknown reason. It was the February 13th agenda from the Board of Supervisors meeting. So Tom did ask Gus, you're to check it because it is your responsibility to do that. But that was like at least the third time that it's not been properly posted according to the Sunshine Act. And unfortunately, they took quite a few actions and voted on things. It's actually at the end of the meeting, I asked them to check with Todd King, the solicitor, because as far as I know, and I'm not an attorney, but you're not supposed to take any actions and vote on anything because the public wasn't notified what was going to be discussed and voted on. So they may have to do that all over next month. But we'll see what happens.
So we have another mention of the 6% increase in earned income
Tax, yeah, for the county. Gus was quite happy about it. And he thinks it's indication that Adams County, despite the rest of the country, is just doing fine. And maybe that's the government that's doing fine, but the residents, they've got increased fuel, their health care, their utilities, everything's so high. And just because they had a 6% increase in their earned income tax for the county, that's really not an indication that Adams County is doing fine as far as the residents are concerned. Especially seniors these days. I wouldn't know anything about that though. But yeah, when they do an increase in Social Security payments, it's nothing compared to the inflation rate. So
Right.
People are hurting, but Gus thinks it's wonderful. Because Gus has a job.
He's got a job, but he's not really doing his job based on some things that have happened
Right.
with permits and land development plans,
Correct. Yes.
or protecting the residents.
The health of the residents, correct. Yes. And other issues. At the Board of Supervisors meeting on February 13, when Mr. Barnhart, who is the project manager for JVI, indicated, well, Gus, I'll be at next Monday's meeting, which was the planning commission he was speaking about. And when I questioned him, are you an engineer? Because that's what the board wanted. The planning commission wanted an engineer. Well, I could answer any of the questions. And then suddenly, at the planning commission, 3 representatives, Mr. Barnhart, their engineer, and I don't think the other guy who spoke actually said his title. But suddenly, they're there and they're presenting their land development plan. I found that really to be a little interesting.
I had a whole squad.
Yeah. Like I said, I sat behind Barnhart. I heard nothing of what he said because he was literally whispering like this. I was like, why is he talking like he's in a confessional? That's what it reminded me of, like as a child going to the confessional, and he whispered. And I'm like, why do these people not speak up? Until I reviewed that video, I had no idea that he actually Mr. Barnhart introduced himself and the engineer, and I'm not sure if he actually introduced that other gentleman, but I was like, no wonder why they kind of looked at me funny, because I didn't hear what he said, and I was directly behind him. And that even happens with Andrew when they're doing Saldo. And it's just not me. Other people have indicated they don't, especially if you sit in the back of the room, you don't hear what's going on. Someone suggested to me, why don't you tell them to put those tables in the back of the room so that those people have to speak up and people in front of them will be able to hear them. Which is true. And that's probably maybe why people don't go, because it's like, why bother going if you're not going to be able to participate and hear what's being said so that you can voice your opinion.
So Ron, he was able to voice his opinion, being on the board.
He did it directly to the engineer.
Yeah.
And with that, with the Myerstown culvert, which is directly in front of his orchard. I thought he had just a regular farm, but apparently it's an orchard. Ron Resch, who was on the planning commission, was very concerned about the timing of when they expected to start the Myerstown project, which supposedly was only going to take 4 weeks. And he was, I can't have that there because, we spray trees, and what are we going to do? I was a little surprised that he told Mr. Resch, the engineer told Mr. Resch, well, you could work that out with the contractor. I wonder if the people on Greenbrier were able to work it out with the contractor that's doing the Greenbrier culvert. I don't think so. It is who you are in that township, whether you get accommodations or not. There's a backstory, which is never brought up, of course, because the planning commission and Gus and the engineer the engineer wasn't, from Shower Design was not the engineer at that time. Township had someone else. But they're aware of what went on. So we don't get the whole story at these meetings unless you question and ask for right to know requests. So.
And that'll just help you fill in some blanks, but you're still not going to get the whole truth. That's kind of the...
No. Unless, of course, you do go in and ask, because that is your right, where you can examine a file. That would probably be the best thing to do. And then you can pick out what you want. I mean, you don't need a land development plan for that, or you don't need these surveys and stuff. You just want to get the gist of any kind of emails or any kind of agreements that this company had for that property with the township, any kind of permits that Gus would have issued, and what their original intent was for that property. And that would have been in their original application. Like, I could request as a resident, you just request, I want the original application for this property. But see, I think you have to go in, look at the file and see what's in there. Because Gus claimed that they were also, this these, I guess the applicants were somehow in court at one time. And that's what the resident, Jamie Waldron, had indicated at the August meeting of the Planning Commission. What use permit did this township give to this property? What is it supposed to be? I don't ever remember them saying, oh, it was this type of permit. I have to admire that guy because that resident really researched. I mean, he quoted a code in there and everything in his I call it testimony, because it wasn't your average redress of grievance. This is where he went right down the line. He described his historical property, how he's trying to be a good curator of that historic property, and then he's got this business across the street that had previously, and I don't know how the issue is now, where it's just smelly constantly. And that's the issue is, are they supposedly, is this EB Clearing Inc., are they authorized to do composting, or is it just mulch as far as, like, don't they take that from tree, limbs and stuff, and they chip those up, and if they leave those out long enough, they get to be mulch. I'm not sure. But Jamie Waldron really did his research, and at that Planning Commission meeting, he had gone to the Adams County Commissioners meeting. He went to the commissioners, they couldn't help him. He went to State Senator Mastriano, spoke to, I guess, one of his aides, a woman, couldn't help him. Went to Torrin Ecker, who was state rep, couldn't help him. And he finally talked to Gus, and Gus had told him, well, come in and speak to the Board of Supervisors, and I think he mixed up the dates or something and came to the Planning Commission. But when you have an issue like that, where you were literally overwhelmed by toxic fumes, and your wife also, where do you go for help if it's not your local officials that are voted in? Vice Chair Tom Strife said, Gus, what have you been doing about this? I couldn't believe the response was, I listened to him. So it's like, you're the zoning officer. Why didn't you run up to that property to see what was going on? Because if the name of the owner were the Millers, he would have been up there every other day. It'd be interesting to find out how many times he did a report or went out there to inspect that property, especially after hearing what poor Mr. Waldron and his wife had gone through. It is upsetting to see how certain people are treated in the community. And if you're not on Gus's good list, well, he'll be at your house every other day, or, your property. But it's okay that land development plans don't have to be brought before the board right away. They don't have to have their engineer there, despite the fact that the Planning Commission asked for them. And like I said, it's who you are. It's very disheartening to sit there as a resident to think, okay, I don't matter because I'm not part of the clique. They think I'm a transplant, and they have great disdain because of their improper actions. I started recording those meetings. We're all part of a community, and if you are leaving other people out of the decision making just because they weren't born there, there's just division. They sow division.